Hey guys, Uri Peleg here. In this video, I'm going to show you how to win money in today's online games, simply by following just a few basic principles. These principles are an important part of the new course that I'm making for Upswing, the Poker Blueprint, that's coming out at the end of this month. This course is intended to lay the foundations for how to think about poker in a solid yet flexible and creative way that relies on logic instead of memorization and distills the knowledge I've learned from solvers into a clear and intuitive blueprint for winning at poker. But for now, let's dive into a 200 NL live play and see these principles in action. Okay, so the theme is going to be we're going to navigate after the flop to the pot size appropriate to our hand in kind of a very direct, in-your-face way that doesn't think about balance or deception or anything like that. And we're not going to give our opponents credit for knowing how to react to that. This style of play, it puts a lot of pressure on your opponents to kind of understand what's going on, because when you navigate each hand to its pot size in a direct and non-deceptive way, what happens is people see bet sizes that they're not used to seeing. And if they were to realize what you were doing, they could counter by, every better hand raises and bluffs raise appropriately and things like that. But that's very complicated to do. Most guys who are playing poker have a certain framework for what they do and don't know how to do. And this is well outside of the framework, is if I min bet a spot, what do you bluff, or how thin do you raise, or how big do you raise? So by playing in this way, there's a decent chance we get people into a spot where they have to think on their feet, no matter how much studying they've actually done. That's always a good thing, because when people think on their feet, they give away information when they make mistakes. Okay, so how big of a pot size does Ace-King want? Ace-King is generally still ahead if a small amount of money goes in. And the nice thing is, if I fold my opponent off of some Jack-10 or something, that's a nice win for one big blind. So it's sort of like a lot of the reason for these vulnerable hands to want to navigate a slightly bigger pot size is just the protection that they get, which is, it's the counterpart to a value bet. It is worth actual dollars in the bank, so to speak. How big of a pot does A7 of clubs want here? The answer is this is already too big. We're not really winning a showdown. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to let my opponent show me how big of a pot does he want to play. And his answer is not very big. And so we'll make it much bigger than that and kind of see what happens. Now, we get the Jack River, which is, not the most intuitive card to keep blasting on. And this is a spot where his ability to read the story is very, very important. So, generally speaking, when the pot's too big for your hand, which, like I said, ace high is not winning on a board with this many high cards. It's a potential bluff candidate, and you can choose to bluff in all sorts of routes, and the route I'm choosing is the route that puts pressure on my opponent to play well in a certain way. If I start by going bet, 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 the pressure on him is just kind of not to overfold to direct aggression. And that's one of the things that people are most practiced at, even if they probably still do overfold. By going check back, I'm putting pressure on him to defend correctly with a range that he's much less practiced in playing. And when people are in these spots where they're winging stuff, a lot of the times they kind of give their hand away. So by kind of checking twice, a lot of people will not have enough strong hands there. And this is what I mean by attacking discontinued aggression. It's like he had a chance to be aggressive once I checked back. He didn't go for it. So, okay, I can attack. That's like waving a red flag in front of a bull. This is a spot that many, many people are messing up consistently. Now, there's a nice illustration of narrative here on the Jack, and this is a spot where, given I bet big on the turn, how can I still bet big on the Jack River? Would I bet a Jack on the turn this big? Am I saying I have a straight or pocket nines? Would I still bet aces on the river or like a good king if I had it? And all these questions should be in your head, and they're all interconnected to, in a way, how often does he donk bet his jacks on the river? Because if he donk bets all his jacks, I can keep betting my kings. And so there's all this stuff going on. And the truth is, to me, until someone proves themselves at these lower limits, I'm like, you look weak, I'm putting on pressure. And I don't know that you can hand read and say, oh, we bet the turn big. What does he have? And maybe you just look at your 8-7 and fold. So tens here in these positions are doing okay. He should still be 3-betting 9s and 8s sometimes. They're not doing very well as positions get tighter. The difference between 10s and deuces gets lower and lower as your opponent gets very filtered to just having high cards. So here I'm going to call, and I'm going to call it as this is about as much money as my hand is willing to put in. Any extra dollars is way too much for me. Given the turn jack, I could almost see bluffing with 10s. I'm kind of beating 9s and give-ups, but yeah, when our opponent makes the pot bigger, it's just time to say goodbye to 10s. So basically, how consistent of a story you need to tell depends on how good of a player you're playing against. And I don't mean to discredit anyone here. I don't know any of these guys, but generally speaking, as you move down in stakes, your assumption should be people are less capable of telling whether or not your story is consistent, and they're more focusing on what their hand looks like. That's just a natural tendency. As they get better and better at poker, they can be like, oh, wait, this doesn't make sense. He must be bluffing. Or they would be, oh, this doesn't make sense. He'd never be bluffing. And even that is a bit of a crazy thing. So yeah, here Jack 4, pot's already too big for our hand. We have some nice backdoors, so we should be check raising here, or calling a small bet, and if it's a big bet, maybe fold. And now we get to this discontinued aggression spot where, like we said, these are nice spots to attack people. But something I mentioned in the course is you want to have some connection to the board and some connection to what I call the narrative of the board. So we'll call this hand too weak at this point. This board is not crazy good for me in any way. I can't go crazy with everything, so I'm going to try to have something nice in my hand, and I am actually going to give up. And the reason I'm going to give up is that, again, it's a hand reading thing. I think he's heavily weighted to ace jack, ace king, ace queen, the most straightforward hands to play like this, and I don't think those hands are going to fold. So this is a very simplistic way of looking at it. It's not a game theory way, but it's a hand reading way. I'm like, I expect him to have the most natural hand to play this way. And that's generally, I think, a good assumption. That rather than, oh, he could have ace queen, but what if he has this and what if he has that? It's not like, it looks like he has ace queen. He probably has ace queen, and we'll play according to that until someone shows us he can have a different hand there. You could also ask, what if I bet 10 times the pot, wouldn't ace queen fold? And the answer is it probably wouldn't. I mean, fair play to you if that's how you go about it. It would need to fold quite often, though. This is a bit too loose, probably, but it depends on rake structure, so I'm not completely sure, but this is not a significant pre-flop decision. Here, if bets get big, our hand's not happy, and we could call a small bet, and by just calling, we do give our opponent a chance to go for some discontinued aggression if he chooses to check the turn. Let's see if he wants to do that. He does? Okay. So, like we said, we want to attack these discontinued aggression spots. You could go for all sorts of sizes here, but we want to tell a coherent story. And the story I'm going to tell is I have something really, really strong. The thing with this spot is that there's a lot of hands that missed. It's not easy for me to have an ace. I can't bet a lot with a jack. So, if I make a normal-sized bet, it's very, very easy to call. The thing you want to be thinking about here, and this is what I call the narrative of the hand, is when you bet the river, which hand are you telling the other guy you have? You could tell him you have a jack, but then the bet would need to be very small. And you could tell him you have an ace, and then the bet would be medium, but there are not that many aces you could have. And then the last option is you could tell him you have a flush or ace deuce or ace nine or ace four of spades. So something where it's not only an ace, it's actually, an ace that beats all his aces. So 2 pair plus, say. In theory, your opponent should check back flush draws and he should check back some good aces and make your life kind of tough. But unless they show you they can do that, this is a very tough bet to call when you're at the top of your range. Puts a lot more pressure on people to know what's going on. So just a way of attacking discontinued aggression combined with thinking about the narrative and what hand I'm repping. So here, how big a pot does ace-jack want? I think when my opponent bets this much, the answer is I want a little bit more, but not very much more. There are all sorts of ways you can accomplish that. One would be to call and one would actually be to raise. And let's raise to this size. This is roughly the pot size my ace-jack is aiming at. And let's see if you're capable of actually reacting to this, to the fact that my raise size is ridiculously small. It doesn't make sense for any. Like, why would I raise a set so small? It's a very weird size, but it's very tough to react to this. Imagine you're him, you have tens, you have nines, you have queens, you have ace five. It's very, very hard. By virtue of him folding, did we get what we want? Well, like we said, we're investing so little, and imagine he folds fives. That's a hand that could suck out. It's not putting in money bad, so yeah, not too bad for us. Okay, so here we're going to be very direct about the pot size we want, and I mean, we want a big one, so let's actually start with an overbet. Like I said, this is not deceptive because this is what ace-king wants. It's not what a bunch of other hands want, and for this video, it's every hand on its own. Anarchy. These hands are no longer a democracy. They're no longer a unified front. Every man on his own. No one's sticking around in the range to make sure someone else doesn't get bullied. We're having none of that. A7 here, this is roughly what A7 can take, I would say. I'm happy checking down now. Keep in mind my kicker doesn't play, so I chop with ace-x. Could also see a bluff. It's very, very close. But, my opponent kind of took us where I want to go, so I'm okay with letting it be, so to speak. And look at this, our opponent was actually very, very tricky. Hoping that I would, have a float and then apply lots of pressure to his check. So well played by him. And we need to take a note. Just be aware of who is or isn't capable, because I keep telling you guys what we're doing is we're being direct until someone proves us he can do something about it. So this guy is kind of proving, oh, I am fighting back a bit with my more defensive ranges. This can call or bet. Let's play a call. And here we're going to have to fold. The pot's too big. Any bet is too much. And yeah, once our opponent checks back, could we bluff ace-4? So the board's so good for him. Again, it doesn't make sense to go too crazy. And very likely, if you ask me, like, what does this guy likely have? I'd say jacks, tens, ace-king. I mean, 3 bets and then checks back. Jacks, tens, ace-king, ace-jack. And this fits with those hands. And like I said, we could be like, oh, I'm going to try getting him to fold everything. But once you start going down that route, there's a big risk of someone catching on to what you're doing. Like the guy with the 6-8 and just winning a stack. Okay, so I guess we can play king-queen again. These hands get very borderline versus tight ranges. And then we can ask how big a pot does our king-queen want? The answer is we just really want to fold. Let's start out with a bet and see how the hand develops. And here, because the story is we have a very tight range, king-queen's a nice hand to barrel. But okay, cool, we turn the king. How much money do we want now? Probably all of it. But there's like a clean way and a dirty way to get all of it. And Yes, in this video, I said we're going to be very direct. So let's go with a direct bet. And what I mean by a clean way is if it goes check, check, all of it is much nicer than if it goes bet, bet, bet. But yeah, that's neither here nor there. Here, like I said, we're being direct, which I think generally is correct. We're putting him to the test of course, maybe he just has the nuts and snap calls, but what are you going to do with ace jack? What are you going to do with pocket tens, pocket queens? Right? He can't get away with calling over a king there without letting my bluffs perform really well, and people tend to be very aware of that. Alright, that's it for this video. Thanks again for tuning in, and make sure to check out part 1 of this series if you haven't already. We'll have another video coming out next week, and if you want to check out my new course, The Poker Blueprint, you can pre-register using the link in the description below. See you guys next time.